I was signing more corporate sponsorship deals and pushing climbing into more of a mainstream scope, which wasn't a popular opinion at the time. I was the one getting bloody with criticism and being called a sellout and having even my successes questioned, regardless of being able to move or not. I woke up each day and wrote down 3 things that I was grateful for. I started opening up vulnerably, like, about these horrible experiences that I had. It does suck that so many women go through that, and it's like across so many industries. It was wild to me to not be able to move after being used to moving my body like 4 to 5 hours a day, to just literally seeing my body like atrophy and wallow away, and trying not to let my mind go there of like what's to come. I won't be accepted by some of these people that I wish I could satisfy. And so I need to just focus on what is best for me and what's best for the young girls who are like me.
Welcome to the Big Silence Podcast on the road.
I see you were looking into a GoPro over here.
I am looking into a GoPro, and Bobby here has built a mobile podcast studio that we are planning to hit the road in May.
Oh, we're on the road right now.
Well, we are on the road, yes, but we're really hitting the road in May to go to different cities. And whenever we're in a city, when we're on the road, we are filming podcasts with different guests. So we're just going to invite you to come into our van. It's not creepy.
I'm staring at people right next to us.
Our neighbors. Okay,
Yeah.
So we're in Yosemite right now, and at the campground Upper Pines.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Bobby and I are going to do another podcast with the AMA questions and talk. You had a lot of questions about camping and adventuring and snacks on the road and all this stuff. So that'll be in a couple weeks. But I just want to say the camper next to us has a Pomeranian.
I mean, what are the odds? You don't see many camping Pomeranians, but there seems to be an attraction over here.
Sprinters and Poms.
Yeah.
But I also want to say, if you are in Austin, Texas on March 10th during South by Southwest, come hang out with me. One of our foundation, Big Silence Foundation partners is Kendra Scott, and Kendra Gives Back. She's been so incredible, and we're doing a little sip and shop. Come hang with me, and I'll help you pick out a nice little stack of jewelry.
Wow.
Yes. And 20% of the proceeds go to the foundation and our programs.
Very nice.
So shout out to Kendra and her entire team. We've done this a few times before. So flagship store, Austin, Texas, March 9th, 11 to 1. Okay. So this is ironic. We're doing today's intro for the guest, Sasha DiGiulian, and we're in Yosemite. She is a world-class climber, and she's a female in a male-dominated sport. And you showed me the mountain. What's it called?
El Capitan?
El Capitan. Yeah, she just climbed that in December.
Yeah. I mean, she's a Red Bull athlete.
Yeah.
Like, insane.
She's a big deal.
Yeah, she's a real big deal.
Very, very big deal. So she is one of 3 women in the world to climb. I don't know what this means, but if you listen to the podcast, she explains this. But a 9A 5.4D. Do you know what that is?
You know, I'm not a rock climber, but
sounds hard.
I'm going to watch more of her videos, and I'm going to get very inspired to get started.
I know today you're like, I'm going to start rock climbing. I'm like, let's not start at El Capitan. But anyways, so that type of climb is recognized as the hardest in the sport. And only 3 women have done it. And she did it twice.
There you go.
Yes. So in this conversation, we talk about being a female in a male-dominated sport, how her highs and lows of her career, which she also talks about in her new book, Take the Lead, Hanging On, Letting Go, and Conquering Life's Hardest Climbs. It's a really good book, and she wrote that while climbing El Capitan, hanging off the ledge.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe me?
I do. I watched.
You didn't even flinch.
I know. I watched videos, and she's incredible.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about you. You're like, she's a female in a male dominated sport, and I was like, so are you.
Yeah.
Business.
Yeah.
You're a successful businesswoman. You've climbed some mountains.
Oh yeah.
And
climbing.
Got some cuts and bruises along the way.
Yeah.
I saw Sasha had some injuries.
Well, that is when she wrote this book. It's her memoir, how she fell in love with climbing and her whole story. She had a major injury, and the sport is her life, and how she overcame that hurdle and it's climbing again. It's an incredible story. So listen till the end. And she was like, I'm not an adrenaline junkie. And I was like, are you sure? She also just ran her first Ironman last week.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, we got to hang with her.
Yeah, we got to. Yeah.
Shoot.
Let's go hiking. Okay. So
Let's go climbing.
enjoy this podcast with Sasha. Make sure you share it. Make sure you subscribe to Apple Podcasts and leave a comment. We love you and talk to you soon.
The Big Silence, empowering personal experiences, inspiring compassion, and healing lives. We are no longer silent. We are here. The Big Silence. The Big Silence.
All right, Sasha DiGiulian, welcome to the Big Silence podcast.
Thanks so much for having me today.
All right. So, as I've mentioned, Sasha is a world champion climber, and we're talking about climbing, taking the lead, her new book that is out, Taking Lead, Hanging On, Letting Go, and Conquering Life's Hardest Climbs. So, I have had so much joy learning about your story and a female in a male dominated sport. And before we even dive in, can you explain to someone who's listening what climbing is?
Sure. Climbing, it's a broad sport. So I will define it in two different categories. There's indoor climbing and there's outdoor climbing. My start was in indoor climbing, which is the climbing gyms that you see around the world. They are now becoming big, epic fitness centers. And in climbing gyms, you'll often see like different plastic holds throughout these vertical walls. And you can go in, anyone can go in, sign up for a day pass, and learn more about the sport. The sport at its origins really follows a grade scale. So that's how you can track your progression from an elite level to an entry level. And that's the 5 point scale, which is called the Yosemite Decimal Scale. And it essentially will track the level of difficulty per climb. So you can have something that is very low angle and easy to scale all the way up to climbs that are like upside down and have hardly any holds. And that goes to the like uppermost level of the scale. So it's numerically increasing. Outdoors is pretty similar, but it's really the root of the sport. The climbing world really began in the outdoors. It's an outdoor originated sport, and then it turned to more of like that commercial side. But outdoor climbing, it's under a grade scale as well. So there's cliffs around the world, and probably notable to some of you guys listening, think of Yosemite. You have like El Capitan, and these cliffs that we see are what climbers scale.
I think my husband today was when I was telling him that I was interviewing you, he was like, Does she done El Capitan? Because we're going to Yosemite in a week and a half. I've never been
Oh,
there.
awesome.
Didn't you? You've climbed there many times.
Yeah, I
Or-
love Yosemite and have climbed there a bunch, and I'll actually be spending a lot of time there this year for a goal.
Oh, nice. So, what I loved about your book too, and I learned a lot, is your glossary for climbing was very
Good.
helpful. Well, that's why I was asking you to define climbing because there's so many words like to educate yourself on all of these terms that most people don't know, but it's something that you've had to learn and so it was really helpful in your book. So that's what climbing is. So why climbing?
Well, the why is a good question. I started climbing when I was 6 years old. My brother had a birthday party at a climbing gym. And I was like any other kid at a birthday party, just there for the, pizza, cake, and activity. But all of a sudden, I was exposed to this activity that I really like doing. And I had no idea that it was a sport. I didn't even know that it was a thing until that birthday party, which my family, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. And it's relatively atypical. It was back in the time, this was the late 1990s, um, to enter the professional climbing space not coming from a mountain town or a family that really knew more about like this historical sport. And I was at the birthday party. I really loved doing the activity. And the climbing gym employee told my mom, "Your daughter seems to have a natural talent for this. You should bring her back to our junior team practice, which meets each Wednesday and Saturday." So that was when I was 6. And I'm sure the gym employee tells that to like every parent, but
Yeah.
I took the bait. And I started going like Wednesdays and Saturdays for about just under about a year. And then when I was 7, I walked into junior team practice, which was on a Saturday morning, and there was a competition being held. So I literally stumbled upon the whole idea that climbing even had like a competitive side to it. And then fast forward to the next decade and a half of my life was going to competitions from starting at the regional level to competing in junior nationals, becoming on the junior national team. To then when I was 16, I was eligible to be competing on the adult level circuit. So that was winning US Open nationals and then competing for the US team in World Cups and World Championships, Pan Ams, and stuff like that.
Okay, so when do you transition and when do you know you're ready to transition from the indoor climbing wall to outdoors? And what is the first outdoor climb like?
My first time climbing outside was actually a similar time to when I first went indoor climbing.
Mm.
And I'm actually half Canadian. So my mom is from Montreal, it's where she lives
Love
now.
Montreal.
And we would always travel to a place called Mont Tremblant.
Hmm.
And it's not how you say it with a French accent, but I'm
Yeah, I know.
gonna go
I
with
have a
that.
few friends from Montreal.
Um,
They would say it way different.
Yes, and, there was just basically a guide that took me and my brother Charlie and my cousin Sadie out, and I remember, like, loving having snacks and, like, being on this wall. So as a young kid, it was really about just, like, being outside with my brother and my cousin. Then when I was a little bit older, after I had been going to the climbing gym more, I went with my junior team and it was kind of like, I guess kind of like you could think of like Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, going with like adult supervision. But for people who are more my age, who are like looking to get into climbing or any age, frankly, you can go out with a guide is probably the most recommended because there's outfitters around the country who can really like bring you to this exposure to outdoor climbing with safety
Hmm.
involved too. Like one of the biggest entry points for climbing outdoors is just knowing how gear works and how to be safe.
So do you free climb or do both with the ropes? I should know from going through the glossary in your book, but ropes or free climbing? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, so what I do now, I really focus on big wall free climbing is the classification, but free climbing,
Okay.
contrary to what some may think, free climbing and free soloing are not the same. So free climbing is climbing with a rope, but not using any gear or protection to help you as you climb, versus free soloing is without a rope entirely. And the reason I don't free solo is because any rock break, any foot slip, like that's hard to 100% control in a sport that's full of variables that you can't control, then the consequence is fatal. But with free climbing, you fall all the time and you fall into your rope.
So you have your boundaries.
I have my boundaries and something that I feel really passionate about is explaining to people how climbing actually is safe. Like you can go and climb and I'm not an adrenaline junkie. Like I love coming home and I love pushing myself physically and mentally, but I also am very aware of the risks that I'm taking.
Yeah, so there was nothing that you were climbing away from. There was no childhood trauma or something you were trying to break through or get rid of fears or anything like that. You just, and you're not an adrenaline junkie. So you just loved the sport, and that's the sport you went towards?
Exactly. Yeah. I think that I had success at an early age. I had my first endorsement deal when I was 12. And I really cut my teeth and built my reputation in the competition world. And then I had this freedom to go and explore the outdoors. And that connection with just being outside and in the elements and learning about friendships and ways to be a better steward of the planet came as a factor of being involved in this sport from a young age. So it's been a really fun journey to travel. I've traveled to over 50 different countries in pursuit of
Cool.
the sport. But no, it's not trying to escape anything. It's really just trying to see what I'm capable of.
Yeah. Okay, so you're going on your first what's your first, like, climb that you were a little intimidated of?
Hmm.
If I don't know, maybe you don't get intimidated by a climb. I don't know.
I get intimidated all the time. It's actually more of a question of like, what climb was I not intimidated? Um, because I think I deal with people are new to the sport think like, oh, you must not be afraid of heights or anything like that. And I actually experience fear a lot. It's more of how um we confront it and developing skills of like mechanism for, when I feel fearful in a moment, what I do with that fear. My first big wall climbing experience, and big wall is classified as multiple rope lengths of a
Mhm.
climb, typically over 1,000 feet in vertical distance of the cliff that you're scaling. That was probably the most like fish out of water experience that I've had. And that was when I was 19. I went to the Dolomites in Italy and had come from this background of competition climbing in these like very safe, controlled environments to single pitch climbing outside where you climb up, you get to the top of the climb, and then you lower back down. All of a sudden, I was on these like what can be multi-day experiences where you're on the wall and you're like really living there. And so learning the ropes, so to speak, in a condition like that was very new to me and probably the height of like this feeling of, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to learn these skills.
Okay, so what is your physical training on off of the wall to be able to climb?
Well, I typically do a lot of sport specific climbing. So, training, that would be climbing specifically. I built a training center in my garage, actually, which is separate from my house. And we excavated it and dug down and built different climbing wall systems boards, which are connected to LED lights, which then correspond with Bluetooth technology so that I can be lighting up different paths up those walls at varying degrees of angle. They're the system sports that I have are called the moon board and the kilter board. And really anyone around the world could be using these systems. I also have a wall that is kind of like think of a treadmill where you're
Mhm,
running,
mhm.
but it's vertical. So it's called a tread wall. And it's like you can
Oh, yeah,
climb
I've seen those.
3,000 feet in distance without leaving 2 feet above the ground. So I'll do a lot of that, typically 3 hours a day, about 5 days a week. And then I do a lot of cross training, which is more like lifting and cardio work. I do about, well, right now I'm doing a half Ironman for fun next week, actually. So
I
I've
love it.
done
Half
more
Ironman for fun.
cardio than normal. But normally it's at least like an hour or so, 5 to 6 days a week with a lifting, like strength and conditioning routine built in there.
What half Ironman?
I'm going to Panama. It's in
Oh,
Panama
fun.
City.
Okay.
And I don't know why I chose Panama. I cannot tell you. But it'll be warm and it's my first.
Oh,
So
okay. You got it. I've done them. Haven't for many, many years, but it is a mental, as you know, through your sport, it's very mental. So a half Ironman is definitely another mental challenge, which I loved it. I literally like cried, laughed, sang to myself. As you know, like climbing, you must
yeah.
be, it's hours and hours, possibly days. And so you have to be in this mental state that can get you through that. So when you're climbing, what is your mental training to get through a climb?
A lot of my mental training, I work with a sports psychologist, and a lot of it, with that said, happens in live time and through experience and exposure. I try and focus on controlling my breath. I think that that's really important beyond the wall. Like, it's important in going into business meetings, like stressful environments, just knowing when to breathe. I do like to monitor my heart rate variability. I'm generally wearing a watch while I climb so that I can see like the different spikes in my heart rate and control that. Um, with regards to mental training as well, I do meditation.
Mhm.
Probably not as often as I should, but working on that breath work is really important. And for me, something that I've been learning as I grow with the sport is just being more aware of what I feel at different points in my
Mhm.
time of different climbs. So if I feel really nervous or like gripped on a climb, checking in with like, where is that originating
Mhm.
from? And why do I feel all of a sudden like this paralysis analysis feeling of like I can't move forward, I can't move back, I'm like frozen. And in climbing, depending where it is, like it's laying out those risk variables. It's like mitigating what is stressful about this situation and what can I control and what can't I control,
Mhm.
and then figuring out how to navigate from there. Because in some of my climbs, there are certainly places where I can't fall. And so that's not going to be an option because if I were to fall, I could be very injured. And accepting that and being in control of my mind so much as I think you've got this, like saying little mantras to myself like that. But then also where irrational fear steps in is like it's a perfectly fine terrain for me to just take a fall. And so sometimes I just do that. It's like really harnessing what it is that you're fearful of.
Whew. That's, I mean, yeah, that's crazy just to how many days have you been perhaps by yourself out there?
I'm typically with a climbing partner.
Yeah.
So while climbing's an individual sport, you're always putting your life in the hands of your partner, which is a really unique aspect of climbing. It's like a team sport by way of it takes two climbers to get to the top of the wall, unless you're free soloing again, which is climbing without a rope, which is a very rare pursuit of climbing.
Okay, so what is the longest amount of hours in a day that you would be climbing up? And then how do you know, like, do you track ahead of time, like, where your campsite would be for the night?
So I've climbed straight through 24 hours if I'm trying to do something in a day. If I'm doing a climb where we're sleeping on the wall, which is essentially you use a portaledge, which is like a technical form of a hammock.
Oh my
Then you'll climb, say, 18
god.
hours and then build your portaledge on the side of the cliff. And that's where you'll eat, energy bars or have hauled up some water and like a jet boil and have dehydrated food. And then, yeah, you do go to the bathroom
Just
there,
off the wall.
in your harness while hanging off the side of the portaledge.
Hey, you know what?
And
In the Ironman, you pee on yourself. On the bike, it's the easiest. I thought I would never do that, and I'm like, "I gotta go."
I know I'm gonna have to offline with some advice around the Ironman with you after.
Yeah. So, let's talk about you, being a female in this sport. Are most of the partners that you climb with female as well? Or I know it's a very male-dominated sport.
It kind of depends. Like, I've climbed with male climbing partners for the majority of my climbs for most of my career. And then because of that, I became really interested in building all female expeditions because I frankly was getting sick of the chatter that would happen sometimes behind the scenes of whenever there's a male climbing partner involved. It felt like, for me at least, people would say like, oh, maybe, he did all the work, or maybe he
Mm.
led all the pitches and she just followed. And so it was really owning my story and owning the fact that no, I was doing an equal amount of work. And so I wanted to really create all female expeditions, not just for myself to really take away that like attribution to someone else, but also because it's a really empowering experience when you have the right team of women brought together and everyone's supporting each other, and you can kind of like, there's different energy. And
Mhm.
some of my most fun trips have been when it's been like last fall, I went to Pico de Europa in Spain to climb one of the hardest walls achieved, or I guess it was the hardest wall achieved by a team of women. And that was with two good friends that I had who happened to be two female climbers. I've also had it go wrong. And
Mhm.
I've had it go wrong on both sides. Like if it was a male climbing partner or a female dynamic, I think that the most important thing for me is just like that energetic connection, that we get along and we want the same thing and we have the same intention and we have the right communication.
Okay, with partners, do you usually have the same partner for each climb, or do you mix it up? How do you choose your partner? Have you ever had to climb and just meet someone right away and you're climbing together and you have to trust each other?
Those are all great questions, and they would depend on each like climber to have different answers. For me personally, like I like to have a preceding relationship,
Mhm.
like friendship with the people that I choose to climb with, because so much of it is trust.
Yeah.
And so it makes me kind of uneasy to imagine
Showing
going up
up.
a rock cliff
Yeah.
with someone that I have no idea who
Yeah.
that is and if they even are safe. But I do change up my climbing partners. So, like, I don't do everything with the same partner. There are a lot of climbers that may climb with their boyfriend or their husband or their wife. My husband is like a recreational climber when he can for fun,
Mhm.
and he's never my climbing partner, for instance. But I like having that separation. Like I like having my friendships blossom within the climbing world.
So let's go back to female in a male dominated sport. I feel like you're a huge voice for women athletes. Didn't you go to the White House to speak there on behalf of women empowerment?
I have been to the vice president's house and have moderated a panel with the vice president as well. And I'll actually be at the UN next month speaking on behalf of the outdoor industry.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I'm
Congrats.
on the board of the Women's Sports Foundation and have had lots of great experiences with organizations working towards creating more equal access and equal pay within female athletes' exposure and recognition.
Do you feel like since you've been in the sport that there's been some change, that it's getting better?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I cut against the grain in so many ways with my career. From when I was about 18, 19 years old, I was signing more corporate sponsorship deals and pushing climbing into more of a mainstream scope, which
Mhm.
wasn't a popular opinion at the
Mhm.
time. It was like very protected, and climbing kind of has like a dirt bag culture to it that's circulates around this scarcity mindset.
Mhm.
And so when I was opening the door to more commercial work, it was like I was the one getting bloody with criticism and being called a sellout and having even my successes questioned, whether I deserved what I had. And I've gone through that my whole career. And I've just come to realize that everyone's always going to have an opinion. Like you can't please everyone as much as in
Truth.
my
Mhm.
teens and early 20s, I tried so hard. And then I realized like I won't be accepted by
Mhm.
some of these people that I wish I could satisfy. And so I need to just focus on what is best for me and what's best for the young girls who are like me, who were looking for that role model to really make a stance and be different and be okay with that. But it hasn't been easy, and I can't say that I'm not affected by criticism now.
Well, hey, I'm with you on that one. I'm being in my own fitness wellness space for 20 years and it still comes and it's still, and then everyone else wants to claim for your success, I'm sure. And um, I just commend you on the being such a powerhouse woman and standing up for yourself and doing something that a lot of people don't dare to do.
What's crazy is like the more I started opening up vulnerably, like about these horrible experiences that I
Mhm,
had and stuff like that, the more I realized, like, as you say, I'm familiar and
mhm,
realizing like it does suck that so many women go through that. And it's
mhm.
like across so many industries.
Yeah. Well, we'll just keep doing our best, to keep
Exactly.
forging forward. So, okay, you basically have been climbing since you said 6th grade or 6 years.
Since I was 6 years old.
6 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you have hip surgery and you cannot climb. So what caused the hip surgery?
So I had what's called hip dysplasia. And leading up to having 5 hip surgeries over the course of 2 years, where they essentially cut my pelvic bone in 4 different pieces and shaved down my femur head and built a new socket for my femur head to stay within. What was happening was this sensation of essentially my femur head popping out of the socket. And for a couple of years, it was like this mounting hip pain that I was having. And it's a mix of congenital hip dysplasia, something that you can be born with, but it can be not bad and or not caught.
Mhm,
And so my hip dysplasia was kind of like my kryptonite. Like it was amazing because I had hyper flexibility and in a sport like climbing, you're using your hips constantly and getting in these very like flexible positions,
mhm.
especially I'm 5'2", 5'3" on a good day. Maybe I'll land in the middle. I would be very flexible with my body so that I could maneuver my way up the wall in creative ways. And this was really demanding on my hips. And it caused this wear and tear over the next 20 years that I eventually went in to get a cortisone shot because I was going on this expedition to Mexico. And I was in so much hip pain that I had been told, like, just get a cortisone shot, it'll put the pain away.
Mm.
The surgeon required an MRI so that he could know what was going on before just injecting. And that was when he told me that I would need to do these surgeries if I wanted to be out of pain. And that was the PAO surgery and scope are what the medical terms are. It was 2020. So
Wow.
uh March of 2020. I think we can all remember
Yeah,
like
I
the
remember March
there.
2020. Yes.
Yeah, and I had just been told this news, and, I ended up going down on this expedition anyways, not having the cortisone shot because it was going to degenerate my hips further, and essentially, I was hoping to save whatever cartilage was left so that there wasn't bone on bone rubbing in my hips, so that after this trip, I could have these surgeries and it would be my last hurrah essentially in my career because at the time I was told by multiple surgeons that they had never seen someone come back to be a professional athlete having these. And so during that time, unfortunately, the expedition ended up in a total tragedy. There was a death on the trip with someone involved with the climb. And we all came back really shattered
Mhm.
and confused, and when we flew back, it was March 12th. So the next day is like the country shut down. It's a time of uncertainty, and so I ended up having my first surgeries in May of, 2020.
So for someone who I would I'm making an assumption, but is identified with climbing and that is your life, how do you work through that? You're going through these surgeries and you had each hip, but separately, right?
Yeah, it was the left side, then the right side.
So you are not able to move your body for how long?
I didn't move my body for, like, 6 to 9 months.
And you're in the pandemic.
Yeah.
isolated from people. What was that like for you? For someone who's used to this freedom and nature and people that are active with you, and I assume there's a climbing community, like you can't move your body, you're isolated. How did you navigate that?
Frankly, it was really hard.
Mhm,
And I went to some really dark places. And through that, I'm really thankful
mhm,
because I found this new purpose and new light. It is when I had studied nonfiction creative writing at Columbia, and I knew that one day I wanted to write a book. And that day never felt right because I was always on the move
mhm,
and I was still in the heart of my career. And all of a sudden, I was at this big inflection point where I didn't know what was going to come next. And I just started writing. And because of that, like I literally couldn't even sit 90 degrees upright because that was part of my restrictions. I had to relearn how to walk 3 times. The part of the
yeah,
surgery is like my abs were cut out of my body and then sewn back in. So relearning that connection of my lower body and upper body, I had to find motivation to get out of bed each day.
mhm,
And in that process, it was a lot about finding the control of what I could do. So staying on top of my PT was like the physical, but my PT some days was just like moving my ankle right and left.
mhm,
And then it was the mental work of like meditation and breathing and trying to fuel my body really well. Nutrition had always been something that was important to me, but I learned a lot through the process of like, how can I really optimize what I'm putting into my body to get the best results for my recovery? Because I want to come back and I want to be able to just walk again. And during that process, I started writing and I also started kind of the building blocks of launching my superfood protein bar company called Sun Bars because I had always made my own bars for climbing, for expeditions. In the book, I talk a lot about going through disordered eating and having to use nutrition to get out of that vicious cycle of being really depriving my body of nutrients and not knowing what to eat. And so writing and business became these new lights and physical movement, like it wasn't possible for
yeah.
me.
So let's go back to you can't even sit 90 degrees upright. You're used to being active. You're doing this, but now you go and you're like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to start sin bars. I'm going to do this. For someone listening who feels like they're in a place where we'll just say they can't move, like they just can't lift themselves up. What is some motivation to them to be like, you can move? And I'm not saying physically like they're injured or anything, but just someone who's in that place and whatever has happened in their life and they're feeling stuck. Where's the motivation to keep moving forward?
I would say finding out what you can do
Mhm,
and whether it's like developing a new passion for if you can stand up out of bed and move in a kitchen, like cooking or baking or something like that. Maybe you can't even get out of bed. So it's like finding light in the small things, but also for me, something that was really important was reminding myself what I'm grateful of having, regardless of being able to move or not. It was, I woke up each day and wrote down 3 things that I was grateful for
mhm.
and I'd try and change them each day, so it wasn't always like, "My dog, my cat."
I know mine's like
Um,
my husband, my Pomeranian's a roof over my
yeah,
head.
exactly.
But
So,
even
like
the tiniest things can really boost your mindset.
but I think animals and partners and friends, like, it's so important to note those too, because, like, we got a puppy during this time, which was
Mhm,
crazy because my husband was also, like, having to help me go to the bathroom.
mhm,
Um But animals can bring so much light
mhm,
to your life as well. But I think it's focusing on like those small things and taking each day as monotonous as it can be Like it was wild to me to not be able to move after being used to moving my body like 4 to 5 hours a day to just literally seeing my body like atrophy and wallow away and
Okay.
trying not to let my mind go there of like what's to come.
Well, you're a great role model for that, where you believed in yourself and you're like, this, okay, I'm given this. This is not happening to me. It's happening for me. How can I shift? What do I always wanted to write that book. Maybe higher powers like, you're gonna lay down, you're gonna write that book. You're gonna create your sin bars. This is, you gotta slow down, whatever it is. But it's a great thing where a lot of people perhaps would fall into the victim role, and depression can set in when you identify yourself as a certain person or a certain way. But having that strength and knowing and seeing you now, because you're climbing again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm probably climbing again, and I did one of my hardest climbs in my career after surgery. But I think that the note on depression is that it can hit anytime, whether you're thriving in your sport, in your job, in your daily life, or completely injured.
Mhm.
Because for me, it's been a lot of balancing like when do these feelings of darkness seep in and how do I get in front of them?
Mhm.
And so a lot of that work I've become more aware of since being completely like flattened by injury,
Mhm.
but it's not something that's like new to me of dealing with just like how to strengthen my mind and have more resilience through having really low points in life. And sometimes that even just comes after major triumphs too. It's like you do this big thing and then you feel completely empty and depleted and tired
Yeah.
and purposeless. So I think for me, it's come a lot to like always focusing on the gratitude, but also the purpose to help propel forward.
Yeah. That's beautiful. You touched on disordered eating. And to me, when I hear you say that as an athlete and the strength that you have to climb, can we talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, disordered eating is kind of like the elephant in the room of climbing
Really? Okay.
because it's a strength to weight ratio sport where the less you pull up the wall,
Mhm.
the easier it is. But with that said, as I delayed puberty till I was like 19 years old and then had to deal with these changes in my body, it was almost like in the first chapter of my career, my achievements felt like a different body had done them. And I needed to relearn how my new changed womanly body, like
Mhm.
still an elite athlete, but with these new features and with like this change in how my center of gravity had adapted, I needed to relearn that as well. And with that, it's hard because I think that as a climber, that's something that, at least during my time of competing, wasn't talked about. It was just whispered about behind the scenes.
Mhm.
And all of the climbers that I grew up looking up to were rail thin. And that was the example that like I saw as what you needed to be. And now, thankfully, that's changing, and there's more knowledge going into how to properly train and fuel and incorporate strength and conditioning. But for a lot of climbing's history, it was like you improve your climbing by strictly climbing. And that experience can then be heightened if you want to go and do something quickly, just drop 5 pounds. Like I talk about it in the book too, but I was in fifth grade the first time that a coach told me you should lose 5 pounds before a competition. And like, I didn't even know at that time what dieting meant. Like,
Mhm.
you're in
Yeah.
fifth grade, you're so young. But it's so seeped into the culture of climbing that that's why nutrition, as well, has been such a pursuit of mine. Is we need to change this conversation.
100%. I think with disordered eating, even when I was a teenager, like we're not born thinking we need to weigh less, we need to be this. It's
No.
always someone's like tells you that, and you should
Yeah.
lose 5 pounds each. And you're like, what? And then it just goes into a spiral. So we need to stop that. But and for me, I listen to that like an athlete, like you have to have so much strength and muscle power to pull yourself up. And I understand how the less weight you have on you, it's easier. But I think of like muscle and strength and protein and needing to fuel your body versus maybe a calorie deficit. But so then you came out with your it's sin bars, your protein
Yeah,
bars.
especially here. I had been making my own bars in my college dorm at Columbia. I have celiac disease, so I couldn't eat gluten.
Mhm.
And I was traveling to World Cups on weekends and different events and expecting my body to perform. But at the time, everything on the market was full of shelf stabilizers, preservatives, chemicals. I just wanted real food that I knew.
Yeah.
And so I would put in like vegetable powders and nuts and dates and blend them up and then send them out to my friends. And then at the time, I was full-time student, full-time professional athlete. There was no time. But I knew I one day wanted to do something with this. So I kept refining my recipes and working on it. And then I met my co-founder of the brand, Ariane Jones, who was a winter sport Olympic athlete turned nutritionist and chef when she was diagnosed with Lyme disease. And so she's really the architect behind like the 2.0 evolution of the bar, where we now have a full serving of greens and we've incorporated adaptogens. They were a big part of my recovery through my hip surgeries. And the bars are all local sourced, local produced, just clean, healthy food. And it's been like a new climb for me
Yeah.
of, just making healthy food more available and, educating other people, especially in the adventure action sports world of, like, how to eat healthy and making it ritualistic because it's hard to stay healthy when you're traveling or
Oh
when
yeah.
you're in the middle of nowhere where there's nothing available.
Yeah. I know. That's so funny. I've toned up protein and we have protein bars and all that. And I started in the kitchen just making my own peanut butter balls or it's so,
Exactly.
yeah. And it was in a time when we produced it too, like this is 10 plus years ago. Just like there's got to be a better product out there. So when you go on your Ironman, are you going to bring your sin bars? Do you have your nutrition all lined up for that?
I actually have been toying around with this because our bars are really high in fiber.
Oh,
And so they're okay to eat at the early start of the bike,
yeah,
but I wouldn't eat them right before the run.
yeah.
I've actually it's interesting because in my day-to-day life, like our bars don't have refined sugar, which is really inflammatory. And I typically don't eat refined sugar because of that. But I like to make my own snacks. Typically, I actually just followed Alan Lim's Scratch Kitchen recipe book and made these like rice and banana crispy bars that are super high in carbs because I found that in the triathlon world, like it's all about like carb composition more
Mhm.
so than like what else the bar is doing for you. So I wouldn't say that actually our bars are the best for like a Ironman necessarily. Like if you're running with that much fiber, it can be dicey.
Yeah.
But for like the everyday, well, I just actually had one when I was like rushing between meetings. It's just like I just want to eat something that's like a salad, but like healthy for me, and I don't need to sit there with a fork. So yeah, different purpose, timing, but at the same time, it's been really fun to learn like nutrition seems to be like the fourth sport in the
Mhm.
tri world.
Mhm. Absolutely timing it perfectly, not being too late, and yeah. Well, I love it. So where can you find sin bars?
Right now, I would say the easiest is on Amazon and our website, just sendbars.com.
Love it. And then where can everyone find your book, Take the Lead?
The book's available anywhere you buy books.
Yep.
And then I post about both of these things on my Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I guess I'm on TikTok too. That Sasha DiGiulian is my handle. It's just my name.
Yeah, and we'll put everything in the show notes. And so, okay, this photo on your cover, is that a photo of you? Is that you actually hanging there? Is this
Yeah,
what it
that
looks like?
photo is actually from the border of northern Jordan, where there's the triangle of Jordan, Syria, and Israel. So it wasn't a recent photo. It was from a couple years ago.
Wow. Well, fascinating. I've learned a lot about climbing and bravery from you, and I appreciate you so much coming on the podcast. And who knows? Maybe if you're in Yosemite or somewhere or
Yes. Let me know.
Zion or
I'd love to go out
wherever.
climbing. I'd love to eat some Tone It Up and also reconnect. Yeah, this was amazing. So thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Sasha.
Talk soon.
The big silence. The big silence.